Hi everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to Higher Educational Study Skill class. And today we're going to have so much fun in discussing the microlearning approach and the growing pragmatism in higher educational study. Today's presenter is me, and my name is Dinar Hutami. And I hope each and every one of you are always at the pink of your health. Okay, everyone. So this is the pinpoints of today's material. The first one, we will talk about the introduction to the topic. Then the second one, we're going to move to the principles of pragmatism and the relations to education. And then the pragmatism and then the aims of education for the third section. And then for the fourth section, we will have the development of microlearning. And then the last section, which is the discussion, we're going to have a very exciting discussion there. I hope you guys watch this video up to the end, and then let's go and jump right into the first section, which is the introduction to the topic. Welcome to the first section, which is the introduction. So in this section, we will talk about the definition of pragmatism, and I will also provide uh, an example of the pragmatism so that it will be easier for the audience to understand what pragmatism means. So, I believe being pragmatic involves being receptive to change and then also the accepting the current state of affairs and also utilizing the change to one's advantage. And this is precisely what the philosophy of the pragmatists believe. They believe that things change, nothing is permanent, and also nothing's lasts forever. If change is going to happen, one might as well make the change and also live with it. For instance, or for example, when a teacher teaches the student as their past teachers taught them in 1980, um, they are actually disadvantages to the students because 20 or 30 years later, teaching the same way, just like what their teachers taught them, for example, like teaching students the same experiences will not help the 21st century children, considering several things, for example, like the curriculum, the school, the condition of the students, the materials, and also the textbooks, because those will have to change. And then the teacher also need to give the students the current insight through the current ways of doing things. And then one of the way for teacher to be able to do it is only by embracing the change. I believe by being the pragmatist teacher, it will be easiest for the teacher to change because they can go inside the classroom and then make something different, do something different. And then for the pragmatist teachers itself, they would have no trouble dealing with the change as they would think that their philosophy, and then they also will believe that it is important for the students to embrace the change as well. And then they would also help the students to realize that the change will occur no matter what in their lives, and then they also they must be receptive to it and then make the most of it. Let's talk about the COVID-19. At that moment, everyone shocked because of COVID-19. There is a shifting from the traditional method of teaching to the modern method of teaching. So at that point, 2 years ago, teacher they used Zoom meeting, Google meeting, even up to now. So this is one of the example that the pragmatist teacher will take a most of advantage of being believe that nothing is permanent and they have to embrace the change. Some people have been through some kind of formal schooling where they have probably had to work in groups because it is well established, and also it is believed that students learn a lot when they interact with their peers. They might have also gone on a field trip to help them better understand the lesson they have been taught. For example, like they can go to the forest and then learn about different ecosystems in the forest. But then COVID-19 came along and then threw away everything we know as the best practices in education. Well, this is, however, not the first time an interruption to education has happened. For example, in different individual countries, due to the natural disaster, to the protest, the war, and also the other reasons. However, to highlight the point, this is the time or the first time that an interruption happened to education, but it happened globally without being able to predict when the interruption will be over, which is the COVID-19. So, given this background, a change must happen. So, at that point, the ministers of education, the educators, the researchers, the students, the parents, and then the public worldwide looked at each other and also began to think of a solution. And then at that moment, the solution is the distance learning. Um, it at that moment it might have been the only way for the education system to demonstrate the resilience. So, according to the UNICEF, out of 127 countries with data, there are five methods used for the emergency remote education, such as the website for self-learning, the TV program, the radio stations, and then the paper-based response with take-home packages. So, website for self-learning or website for teaching is on the top result, which indicates that teacher should help the students to find the right tools or the medium for the students to be able for them to do the self-learning. And then the solution for this is the microlearning. Microlearning can be the effective strategy for students to be able to do the self-learning. Beside, it also can help the teachers to communicate with the students, such as having a class through online teaching. So this is the things or the several things to discuss. The first one is the definition of pragmatism. The second one is the principle of pragmatism and the relations to education. And then the pragmatism and the aims of education. And then the last one is the development of microlearning. So let's begin with the first one, which is the definition of pragmatism. In a very simple words, pragmatism or a being pragmatic means that being able to accept the changes. Okay, but this is, however, some of the definition from the expert. We have the John Dewey. He told us that the pragmatism is the knowledge that comes from the experiences of organism and then the social and also the natural environment, which is written in Biesta and Borbula's book in 2003. And then the other expert, for example, like the Wagner et al. In 2008, also defines that pragmatism claims that action and knowledge are able to help people cope with their environment. And then in 2006, we have two other expert, which I'm not sure on how to pronounce his or her name, but Biesta and also the founder Stratton. I'm not quite sure whether I mention or I pronounce his or her name correctly. But let's see what they think on pragmatism. So they believe that pragmatism has its own interpretation based on the people as they shape their mind by their own experiences. So this is pretty much all about the definition of pragmatism according to some of the experts. All right, everyone. So we have done talking about the definition of pragmatism, and also why teacher should be a pragmatist. And then now let's moving on to the principle of pragmatism and also its relation to education. So basically, these three followings principle are the principle that is revered to Singh in 2007. He believed that the principle of pragmatism has also the relation to the principle of education. Now let's see one by one. The first one is the changing nature of truth. So it is believed that the truth is always relative to time, to places, and also the circumstances. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, when a teacher teaches as their past teachers taught them without considering the changing of curriculums, schools, the students, the materials, and then the textbook that have changed. So it means that they will be outdated. The teacher should give the students new insight, the current insight through the current ways of doing things. And the only way to achieve the goal is to embrace the change according to time, place, and situation. So basically, when pragmatist people believe that everything related to third is always related to time, places, and circumstances, education also has the same point of view. For example, now we are shifting from the K-13 curriculum up to the Merdeka or Freedom to Learn curriculums. So which means that there is a change in curriculum. And I also believe that the textbooks have changed, and then the characteristic of the students and also the characteristic of the schools also change. The first one, which is the changing nature of third principle, has relation to the education. Now the second one is the placing an interesting, experiencing, and integrating activity. So one of the pragmatism's greatest contributions to education is the notion of learning by doing. So the pragmatists claim that the ideas originate from the actions. So every idea should be followed by the action. So activities are engaged in humans' life. Those through action, through activities, a human can learn and also can take experience from them. you know when we are dealing with student centered or when we are dealing with scientific approach, it means that we are letting our students to feel something new, to feel something that they haven't felt before. So it means that they have to do the notion of the learning by doing. The pragmatist has this principle, so it has the relations to the principle of education. And then the third one, which is the last one, is the utility. So, for example, language, physical well being, the physical training, the geography, the history, the science, and agriculture. They should be the subjects, they should be the activities, they should be the experiences that comprise and also organize the curriculum. So, for example, like if the government wants to create a new curriculum, so they have to think of its utility. The pragmatist people would tend to think about the utility of something. So those, when we are talking about education, it also has the same way of thinking. This is why that we have the three commons principle of pragmatism, which has the relations to the education. Okay, everyone. Now let's moving on to the pragmatism and the aims of education. So pragmatism says that the theory and also the practice of education should be based on two main ideas, and this is referring to Sharma et al. In 2018. Let's talk one by one. So the first one is the first what is it? The first aims of education and also pragmatism is having a social function. So basically, a pragmatism for teaching and learning result in keeping things more practical or a hands-on educational methodology. So, teachers should teach a practical learning and also encourage students to grow better. The practical learning is the concept that the education should be applicable to the real world. So, for instance, if a teacher teaches students who live in rural areas, there might not be much practical application for the students to learn about the urban design. Another example would be if a teacher teaches students of arts, there might be a little need for them to teach business, right? But for the children in rural areas, agriculture science is very practical. So, in addition to that, for students of arts, designing interior probably can be a practical thing for them. All right. So the point is that the teacher should know their students and also their lives in order to focus their lessons on what is important to teach for them. All right. The second one is providing the child with a real life experience to a lifelong learning. So, from a pragmatic point of view, learning should help students acquire new competencies in order to use them in real life situations. Thus, a learning requires a scientific method where student can think, can act, and can try something new through experiences. As researchers and students interact with ever-changing world, the rules and also the behaviors they discover may not work in other situations. Therefore, the goal of training is not to find the clear final pattern, but also to learn the process of discovery and also the self-directing to use those skills in the future situation. Okay, so or what we mean by that is what we call this as the lifelong learning. All right. Um, so in contrast, the pragmatism view teachers as the facilitator, as the mentors, and also philosopher. And the primary responsibility of a practical instructor or the practical teacher is to provide issues to the students and also to encourage them to develop a workable solutions on their own. Thus, it is why the study of pragmatism help us to understand the lifelong learning, and most importantly, it helps in self-understanding because education purpose is beyond any degree. We should believe that the education purpose, the functions of it is to serve and also to evaluate our consciousness, to evaluate ourself, to evolve ourselves, and also to help someone to reach a higher state of being, and then also to pave the way to logic and which help in making a decision or in this decision making. Thus, pragmatism believes that lifelong learnings will open our eyes to new perspective and also makes us a well-rounded people. And also it helps us engage in new ideas, in new world, and as a result, we find a passion or a new passion in life. So this is why the pragmatism has also the same aims in education. All right, everyone. Now let's talk about the development of microlearning. So, in the fourth industrial revolution, critical thinking is one of the key skill required, right? And also, after the COVID-19 outbreak, it brings up the changes, especially in educational field. Even though I believe that the traditional way of teaching and learning, which is the offline classes, still play an irreplaceable role. But right now, the online teaching and learning using Zoom meeting or also the Google meeting over new learning channels that change a people's learning pattern. Now we can say that the technological advances are driving changes in learning styles, in learning methods, and also the learning forms. And then one of them is the microlearning. So when we are talking about microlearning versus traditional learnings, these two methods are both different because microlearning is the mode of instruction and teaching and learning which the learner's learning activities are not restricted by the time, the location, so that the students can study whenever and wherever they want to study. Using microlearning tools is expected to motivate the students to learn outside of the womb of the classroom. And also, it can ease the student into learning more naturally since they are not able to meet their teachers. It also shown by the researchers that the microlearning term itself is increased, especially when the COVID-19 outbreak. When we are talking about microlearning, it means that the learners are in control of what and when they are learning through microlearning, which facilitate the development, the transfer, the retentions of their information. Beside that, microlearning encourage lifelong learning, which supports not only formal learning but also the informal learning, because through microlearning, through microlearning media, students are not only having the meetings such as Zoom meeting or Google meeting with their teacher, but they also can study by themselves when they are not with their teacher at Zoom meeting or Google meeting. For example, probably they can learn through the apps. When you are referring to the English apps, for example, you can probably use the Lingo Talk, or probably you can use the YouTube as one of your microlearning media. So, in this matter, I believe that microlearning really encourages the lifelong learning. And this is the a very simple versions of the e-learning, which encourage a learning in short segment, which it is not burdening the students itself, especially when the students are in a higher educational study. All right, everyone. So, as a teachers, I believe that there should be a discussion related to the micro learning tools. So, I have provided four example taken from the journal articles about the micro learning tools and how the result will turn out. Now let's see one by one. The first one is the TED Talks. So the two researchers in 2019 have done the research on TED Talks to see whether the TED Talks can improve students' listening skill and also to see if there is a significant difference in the score between the control and also the experimental groups. And then the result indicates that the experimental group showed improvement after being given treatment with the app, which is the TE Detox, compared to the control group, which is used the American File 2, which is a book with ACD. From this research, it can be concluded that the use of microlearning tool just help the students in improving their listening skill. The second medium or the second tools of microlearning is what we called as full screen. So Topal in 2021 wrote a critical evaluations related to the use of the full screen in English language teaching. So basically, Fullscreen is a mobile software with a video enhanced input that can be used to teach and also study English listenings, a vocabulary, pronunciation, the translation, and also the to paraphrase. This app is indeed entertaining and engaging, thus it can decrease the stress level of the learners and also it can increase learners' motivation. And then the third one is the Rosetta Stones, which I believe that those who are born in the 90s knows about Rosetta Stones. So the study or the research aim to determine whether the use of the Rosetta Stone can enhance a student's vocabulary, mastery, and knowledge, and also the program strength and also the shortcomings of the programs itself. And it was conducted in two cycles, and then it is utilized the Rosetta Stone as the vocabulary learning tool. And then the result is quite shocking because it shows improvements. And at that moment, students were able to pronounce the majority of the words correctly and also to memorize the new vocabulary with more ease and then utilize the correct grammars in sentences. In addition to that, the classroom environment improved as students paid a complete attention because of the use of the Rosetta Stone as the micro learning tools. Um, and also, students did not engage in non-academic activities, so they basically focus on what the teacher do using the Rosetta Stone in the classroom. And then it also showed that the learners tended to be the active learners during the English language teaching and learning. And then the last one is flashcard, which I believe that probably some of you guys as a teacher use flashcard already, but please do note that Jaffer Chick in 2021 examined the usage of a mobile application based on the concept of flashcard to facilitate the teaching of English to elementary school students. Um, and then he feels that utilizing such an application while completing homework is essential for increasing student vocabulary and enhancing their pronunciation and then keeping words in their long-term memory. Because what we believe is that the vocabulary building is kind of a thing that should be, that should be thought as early as possible when the learners are learning English because a vocabulary building is like the root when we about to speak English, right? So the use of the flashcard itself proven to be positive among the students. So the result given implied that the regular use of the application with flashcard can have an effect on the outcomes of the didactic exam that measure the level of vocabulary acquisition in the target population. In addition to that, Jafarchik also examined the applicability in pandemic setting as the microlearning tool, which he saw this as the most potential application for its usage outside the teaching of the foreign languages classroom. So basically, when you are dealing with the TED talks, the full screen, the Rosetta Stones, and the flashcard, are those the micro learning tools that student can basically access by themselves, not only in the online teaching and learning time. Okay. Now, everyone, I hope what I have discussed earlier can be beneficial to all of you guys. I believe that teachers need to be pragmatic and needs to have the pragmatism philosophy because it can promote a lifelong learning of the students itself. So basically, students are not learning only in the room of the classroom, but they also can learn outside of the classroom by themselves using the microlearning tools or medium. So I believe that's pretty much all from me. And then last but not least, I would love to receive any feedback from all of you guys. And thank you so much for listening to my explanation related to my paper. And then please have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.